I want to move from questions about the hot spots to colder places and hopefully keeping colder places from becoming hot spots. Last week in testimony before the Senate Armed Services Committee, Chairman Dempsey made mention that the Russians are standing up 6 new brigades, 4 of them to be placed in the Arctic. The Secretary followed up that the Russians are in fact very active in the Arctic. And that prompted a letter to both of you from the full Alaska delegation suggesting that instead of drawing down the Army presence in Alaska, which was the subject of the listening sessions up there last week, that perhaps the Army should be doing exactly the opposite, in fact, growing its presence in Alaska. So to you, General, can you expand on the statement that the chairman made last week and the Secretary about Russian activity in the Arctic? What is Mr. Putin up to here?
So we have seen over the last several years obviously increased interest in the Russians in the Arctic. There are clear indications, as the chairman mentioned, that they are increasing their presence and building bases, so in the future they will be able to increase their presence and have an impact in the Arctic region. And it's one that clearly has gotten our attention.
And given that it has gotten your attention, what are you doing to adjust your plans within Army going forward?
So first off, what I'm waiting for is we need a strategy of how we're going to deal with the Arctic from Northcom, who's responsible for that. And as they develop that strategy, we will then work to see what our contributions are to that strategy. I have talked to the Command of Army Alaska, who has some thoughts on this, and so we have taken that from him, and we are looking at that internally to the Army now to see how what that means to us in the future. So we are taking a look at that. But we have to rely on Northcom in order to develop a strategy that would allow us then to decide, to understand what our commitments need to be.
We've had discussion over the past several years talking about whether it's prudent to reduce Army's presence given the pivot to the Pacific, the realignment there. And you responded, you've responded several times, that the Army didn't view it as prudent to reduce its presence in the Pacific because Alaska sits at the top of the Pacific there. So I'm taking from your conversation, our conversation here this morning, that you would agree that it is not wise for a kind of change in view or change in perspective as it relates to the Pacific and Alaska's role.
Senator, I have not. I believe it's an important piece of what we do in the Pacific. That's the problem we have now. There's lots of areas I could make that same comment, and that's the problem. We now have to make difficult decisions that impacts our security, and that's somewhat distressing, frankly.
Distressing for all of us. I understand that you were back home in Alaska, my home in Alaska, in February to observe our U.S. Army Alaska troops in training. You got to go out to Black Rapids. I think that they treated you well. I'm told that the weather was about 40 below zero, which is a good sense of what it means to be Army strong, Arctic tough, because it really does develop a toughness out there. But just in terms of our preparation as an Army in dealing with interests in high altitudes and cold places, you've got some pretty exceptional training grounds right there. But I think we also need to recognize that perhaps we have some of the requirements, the assets that are perhaps not sufficient or not ready for Arctic climbs, specifically the SUSV. Can you speak very quickly to the Arctic focus here?
Yeah, so first off, the ability to conduct the training and the necessity for us to be able to have that capability is important. And so I would say, first of all, the overall training is unmatched anywhere. I also believe we can actually use it for other things beyond just Arctic training. I think the capability of the training areas up there can help the Army in many different environs because of the terrain, because of the elevation, and because of others. So I think it has broader application as well, and I've asked us to take a look at the broader application as well of how we can use that. In terms of SUSV, it is problematic. It is a program, as you know, we have not invested in. We're maintaining what we have. We have not invested in any improvements, and I think that's something that as we look to the future, we have to take a look at how we want to operate in a very cold weather environment and what our capabilities are. The problem we have is we simply don't have the budget right now and the modernization capability to do it, as it falls on our current priority list. That does not mean we don't think it's essential or important. It's just not high enough right now for us to invest in that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.